Two mentally disabled men were recently executed here in the United States. One of them is a man by the name of Robert Wayne Holsey, or Holsey, I should say, and the other is Paul Goodwin. Holsey was executed in Georgia, and Goodwin was executed in Missouri. Now, Missouri has already had 10 executions this year alone, and that is actually a record for the state. But when you consider the amount of people we're executing in this country, it's a little bananas. We'll get to that in just a second. First, let me tell you what went wrong in Robert Holsey's case. So apparently, back in the 90s, he had robbed a convenience store, and as he was leaving the convenience store, he shot and killed a police officer. Now, that is a terrible crime. He was convicted of that crime, and he should be behind bars for the rest of his life. But there are certain elements in his case that should be taken into consideration, or should have been taken into consideration, before he was executed. First of all, there was this whole issue of his lawyer being an alcoholic. Holsey's lawyer admitted to drinking a quart of vodka per day during his trial, and that was not enough to win him a new trial. The evidence of his mental deficits included an IQ test score of 70 when he was 15. In school, his intellectual functioning did not move past a 4th grade level, but under Georgia law, a defendant is required to prove his intellectual disability beyond a reasonable doubt, the strictest standard in the country, and one unmoored from scientific reality. Okay, so even though he did test to have an intellectual disability, it didn't matter. People in Georgia decided to convict him, sentence him with the death penalty, and regardless of how many times he attempted to appeal, it didn't make any difference at all. He was executed. Now, the second case involving Goodwin is a little different, okay, because no one can really make an argument that it wasn't a premeditated murder. Some are making that argument, but I'm not buying it for a second, okay? So Goodwin was apparently in some sort of a scuffle with his neighbor. They were constantly arguing. His neighbor was just this older lady. She was a widow, and apparently he and his friends would throw bottles into her front yard. They would give her a hard time. And eventually he was evicted from his home. He felt that he was evicted because of her. And one day he broke into her home, pushed her down some stairs, used a hammer, hit her on her head until she died, and then left a note saying, "You're next." And her daughter, the victim's daughter, felt that it was a note meant for her. But nonetheless, he also tested to have a low IQ of 73, and people were arguing that since his IQ was so low, he shouldn't have to face the death penalty. Keep in mind that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that if you have a mental disability, you should not be sentenced to the death penalty. It's unconstitutional, but nonetheless, these two individuals were executed regardless of that ruling.
Well, and I don't know exactly how it works. I mean, the average IQ that people go off of is 100, correct? Mm-hmm. So that's, that's a baseline. 70 is severely mentally disabled, is it not? I mean, it's not like some sort of like, well, they could get by this and they could do this. That's very disabled as far as I understand. So at that point, it sounds more like whether the government or whether the people that sentenced him care or believe in what they're doing. It's just easier to sweep it under the rug. Just get rid of him. Let's move on. That's what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't matter. Yeah. Because he is 70. Like he doesn't know what's going on. That's what it comes across like.
It really does, especially when there is a case like Holsey's case, right? Where the lawyer admits to being an alcoholic, okay? In fact, let me give you some more details on the lawyer in that case. He was also facing his own criminal investigations for stealing more than $100,000 in client funds. Before the trial was over, he was arrested and charged with brandishing a gun, threatening to shoot his black neighbors, and yelling racial slurs at them. Keep in mind that his client was black, okay? This was the lawyer representing him in the case. So you have that wrinkle in the story, and you also have the issue of his, intellectual disability.
And I don't know how much of a difference it makes between these two men. I mean, obviously, one was, like you said, much more premeditated, seemingly, than the other, and they're both not good. I mean, people lost their lives in a really, really violent, horrible way. But it sounds like something from The Onion. I mean, when it comes to the lawyer who was, taking liquid breakfasts and lunches and yelling stuff at people and brandishing weapons. I mean, at that point, it sounds like something from Idiocracy. It doesn't even sound real.
I know. It's incredible because Look, I'm not in favor of the death penalty regardless of what someone's convicted of. Even if they're 100% guilty, I think it makes more sense to lock them up behind bars for the rest of their lives. It doesn't make sense when we have so much injustice in this country where people are convicted of crimes that they did not commit. Look at the number of people that have been exonerated from the death penalty by DNA evidence. The Innocence Project has looked into that, right? So I think that this is a really bad way to go about things. But of course, we live in a very punitive society.
I will invoke the same rationale. I'm against torture, same reason why I'm against. There's all those good reasons you said, but even if they could do even if they could get rid of all the innocent people and they only got guilty people, and there's a reason why when they would execute someone by firing squad, they would only one guy would have a bullet in his gun. They'd have like 3 people shooting. Why do you think that is?
Guilt.
That is because we know what we're doing is depraved. Yeah. Again, it's depravity. It reveals our own darkness, and it infects the person who's doing the execution too. I used to say that in my stand-up act that, well, if we're going to murder murderers, why don't we rape rapists? Because nobody wants to become a rapist. We all see how gross that would make me a rapist. But nobody has a problem with being a murderer. Murdering someone who's not attacking you and isn't a threat. That makes you worse than a murderer, and it makes you worse than a rapist. So somehow we play this mental gymnastics where we can shut that out of our brains, even though we still just give the 1 bullet, and we still have 3 guys. And I don't know if when they do the lethal injection,
it's the same.
Is it the same way they have 3 people putting something into them? Why is that? So just think about that, because that reveals what's wrong with that process, that what we're doing is so dark and so inhuman that we don't want to think that we're doing it.